I was the first. I was the first preacher in the Christian tradition. It was me that morning long, long ago that first proclaimed the good news that Jesus had been raised from the dead. Me. Now I hear that you folks, here a couple millennium after I lived, that you have this book that you carry around, this book that holds for you your sacred text. You have stories of Jesus in that book. Stories that tell about his birth, his life, his ministry, his death, and his resurrection. I heard there was actually 4 stories. And of those 4 stories, they all tell of the resurrection day. But they don't get all the details the same, do they? Those 4 stories. The details vary in each of those 4 accounts, except for one. Me. I was there. Me, Mary of Magdala. All 4 of the stories got that detail, right? See, we women in my day and age, we didn't have the power to tell our own stories. We didn't have the ability to craft our own lives. We were powerless in so many ways. And so the stories that you carry around in that Bible of yours, those stories are told by men. Not just by men, but by powerful men. But you don't hear the story of us, the women who were there. We were there, even if we aren't named in that book. We were there when Jesus came into Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. We were there waving the palms and throwing the cloaks on the ground. We were there singing Hosanna. Blessed be the one who comes in the name of our God. We were there at that Last Supper when Jesus broke bread for us, when we began our Passover journey, where he looked at all of us and said, "Do this in memory of me." And we were there when Judas was overcame with greed and took that bag of silver to betray Jesus. And we were there when the high priest sent the soldiers to come and arrest our mentor and our teacher. We were there when he was taken to Pilate and accused of treason. We were there when the crowds chose Barabbas over Jesus. We were there when the crowds yelled, "Crucify him." We were there when they stripped him, when they whipped him, when they mocked him, when they hung him on the cross. We were there when he had a crown of thorns placed on his head and a sign above him that said, "Here is the King of Jews." And we were there when he cried out to God, "Father, Father, why have you forsaken me?" And we were there when Jesus, our mentor, our friend, our leader, breathed his last breath. Yes, in that moment when he breathed that last breath, our hearts were ripped open just like the curtain at the temple ripped in two, and a grief came upon me, sorrow that was heavier than any load I had ever tried to carry. And we were there as his body hung on that cross. And we honored his suffering. And we honored his love for us. But we were also devout Jews. And the sun, it was starting to set. And we knew that we had to get home because we had to honor Shabbat. We had to be there to honor our Sabbath. Our God had commanded us that. And so a good man named Joseph, who was from the Jewish village of Arimathea, Joseph went. He was brave enough to go to Pilate after Jesus had died and said, please, let me take him and give him a burial. And we women, we followed from a distance. The disciples had gone home, but we followed. We needed to know where Jesus was going to be laid. We needed to know that we could come back, that we could prepare his body for appropriate burial, that we could anoint him in fragrant oil. So we watched where Joseph laid him. And we saw him roll the stone over the door. We had a plan. Those women and I, those women from Galilee, those women who had followed Jesus for years and months. We were going to sneak out as soon as Shabbat was over. We were going to sneak out and we were going to roll that stone away and we were going to anoint his body. He had taught us about God's love for all of God's people. He had showed us compassion. He had protected us. Women who left everything in Galilee. Jesus called us into a new life, and we, despite our grief, we're going to anoint him and bless him. And we did. We snuck out and we were frightened because women aren't supposed to go out by themselves, and it was still dark and we were frightened and our senses were alive, looking for any kind of threat out there. But we made our way to the tomb with our hearts and our hope. And we saw that the stone had been rolled away. And we stopped. And we started to second guess ourselves. Had we come to the wrong tomb? Did we mistake where Joseph had laid Jesus? What is going on? But we knew we needed to go in and check and make sure. So we went in. And we couldn't see anything. There was nothing in there. It was completely empty. There was a roll of linen cloth that we had seen Joseph wrap Jesus' body in. But there was nobody in there. Suddenly, that dark cave exploded in light. And we looked up, and there were two heavenly beings standing next to us. Their clothing was shining brightly, and it was filled with their radiance. And they said to us, they said, "Why are you looking for the living among the dead? Don't you remember what he told you when he was with you in Galilee? Don't you remember that he told you that he would be turned over to people who loved power more than God? That he was going to be turned over to people who let fear rule their hearts, who were worried about the Roman Empire and chose to do the wrong thing, but that he would be raised." My heart that had been broken into a million pieces 2 days before suddenly swelled. My heart swelled and it began to pound, and my shoulders, they raised and went back, and my chin, it lifted up, and I remembered his words. I remembered his words. He promised us that God's love would never die, that violence will never fully win. And I couldn't contain myself. My sisters and I, we had this amazing vision that we had good news to tell. See, we were the first preachers of the good news. And we ran from that empty tomb. We ran and we danced and we sang. And we went to those apostles and told them the story. See, Jesus had told us that love never dies. That God's not done with this world. That resurrection happens. That new life will burst forth. We told those disciples there. We told them and they looked at us like we were crazy. But I saw a sparkle in Peter's eye. He didn't say much, but I could see that he wanted to believe. That man who only days before had denied Jesus and then wept bitterly. He wanted that story, the nonsense story, to be true. And I knew that when we spoke that good news, that something was sparking in him. I am the first, but I'm not the last. It is your story, this nonsense story. God's love never dies. Death never wins. Evil will not take this world hostage. God is bringing about new life. It is your story. You are the preacher